It's one of those moments of like what I like to call the tectonic plates of emotion that are shifting. And you feel like sometimes they're going to open up and it's going to just swallow you, but sometimes they come together and they form the mountain that you're going to have to climb. And it's going to be hard. There's no one way. You just keep chugging along, you keep going forward, one step at a time, and you can get up to the top.
Welcome to the 2% Factor podcast, where we explore small things that make a massive difference in someone's journey or story. Today we have Mr. Ivan Carreño from Carreño Mezcal with us. Carreño Mezcal actually won first place in San Francisco World Spirits competition, and ever since then has been in hyper-growth mode. So really excited for today's discussion, and welcome to Ivan.
Thank you very much for having me.
Carreño Mezcal is my favorite mezcal, so I'm really excited to have this conversation with you and break down really what were your 2% factor moments along, your journey.
Dude, it's been a wild journey.
I think there's a lot of people who wonder how to start a beverage brand, in particular, liquor brand. Tequila is such a hot subject right now. Mezcal has also been blowing up. So I think it's going to be really interesting to hear what's happened with you. But before we get into necessarily the details of the mezcal, I want to talk a little bit about your journey and how things started for you. So let's back up to, your childhood and some of the things that happened back in the early stages.
Yeah, dude, that's the perfect place to start, because that's how I always talk about it. I was basically 5 years old when my dad and my mom brought me over to the States, right? I was born in Oaxaca, but we were immigrants. Luckily enough, my dad ended up getting like a citizenship through a working program. Then he requested my mom, and they brought me over, and I ended up getting citizenship that way. But it was crazy, because I remember we used to live in a 2-bedroom house actually on 27th Avenue in Jefferson. And it was like 13 of us, so it's just kind of like a wild thing. I remember we would take like the little Food City cart to get the, laundry done with my mom. She'd put me in the basket and stuff like that. I went to school. I went to Trevor Brown High School, actually, out on the west side of Phoenix. And then I dabbled a little bit with ASU, and I thought that I wanted to follow medicine. And then I ended up not going that route. I ended up doing customer service for a tech communication company. I did 13 years at that job, which was an amazing job. It was a super fun job that I had. I was working basically Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. They had great benefits. I got paid really well, and I had like 3 weeks of paid vacation a year.
Got it. So you had a really good job set up. You had your career going. Did you have like any exposure to mezcal as a child from the family or anything? How did that end up coming up as a potential?
So that's the key thing. The key thing for us is this started back in 1904. So this is way before I was born. This is before my dad was born. This is in the era of my great grandfather.
Okay.
So the way you have to understand on how mezcal is, like 90% of the world's mezcals come from Oaxaca. Oaxaca is one of 32 states in Mexico. It's very down south. It's right next to Chiapas. Okay. And 90% of the world's mezcal comes from there. So the way I like to think about it, think of like Scotland. Like if you don't make whiskey, the guy down the street makes whiskey, or somebody makes whiskey, because a lot of whiskey comes from Scotland. For us, mezcal's been around since birth. It's a celebratory spirit. So when you celebrate your birth, you're gonna have a bottle of mezcal with your compadres or your family members. If you graduate high school, or if you do a wedding, any sort of quinceañera, any sort of like celebration event, that's when mezcal gets brought out. And if you don't make it, somebody else makes it down the road.
It's been a part of the family for generations.
Right. And that's where we never had really turned it into a family business. It was just kind of for us. The way making mezcal works is you make a batch. Kind of like, think of if you're going to make like a pot of chili. Right? You don't just make one bowl of chili, you make a pot of chili, and then you have some leftovers for the remainder of the week. It's the exact same thing with the cooking process for mezcal. You make a batch that could be anywhere from 500 liters to 1,500 liters. And that's, if you take that into consideration, even if you were to drink a liter a day, that's 3 years before you're done with with one batch. So it's one of those things where we never had it continuously like that because what we were in the business of doing is we were actually just farmers. My great grandfather, so he's the one that kind of started this journey, and he ended up buying 1,500 acres worth of land in Oaxaca because he had a transportation company. They found an iron ore mine, and so they would pay him to take the iron ore in his cart with his 2 oxen to take it to the main city where there was train tracks. Because back then, this is like rural Mexico. There's hardly any train tracks out there and stuff like that. So they would pay him 1 peso. And then from there, he ended up getting a workforce that would help him do this kind of transportation. And that's what he did. Back then, rural Oaxaca, there wasn't a lot much to do. This is before TV and stuff. So he wasn't buying any of that. So all he did was just buy acres of land. And what he used to do with that, because mezcal used to be illegal, is we would actually plant sugarcane. Sugarcane was our main crop, and then the sugarcane we would process into molasses. The molasses then we would sell to the Bacardi family of Mexico.
When did your family get into mezcal? Was that because of you, or were they into?
So they were already into the business. Like I said, it was my great grandfather that started this back in 1904. Okay. He would basically celebrate 3 times a year.
Okay.
In February when it was his birthday. In April, this is right before the rainy season. So right before the rainy season is when you plant the crop. And so we were planting sugarcane. And then in October, when you harvest the sugarcane. So that's the 3 big parties that he would have. And that's the time that he would bring out mezcal for the parties. Well, now that we're talking about mezcal, I feel like we got to drink a little bit. I hooked you up with some over there in a little glass.
Cheers.
Salud.
Beautiful. What are we drinking there?
So I'm starting you off with Naran. Naran's, some people don't know that it's ours. It's a part of the Carreño lineup. But Naran is more of kind of like our house mezcal. We named it Naran because Naran means lunar eclipse in Triqui, which is an indigenous language of Oaxaca. And we are 100% women-owned. And with that femininity aspect off of it, that's why we named it Naran. Naran is also a palindrome that you can read right side forward, back side up. And it's got a little moon right in the middle of the R. And so basically the idea of that is so that when bartenders go to grab it and pour it and they come down, it makes the full lunar cycle of the moon.
No, it's a good idea. I've actually seen Naran in different restaurants. I didn't know it was part of the line.
Yeah, it's part of the portfolio, but you have to differentiate kind of the aspects off of the mezcal production process on the agaves that there are, because there's over 300 different varietals of agave, and the most common is espadín. So espadín is kind of like your house mezcal, or think of it as a well mezcal, something that kind of gets drinking more often. It's also one of the fastest growing agaves. It's a 6 to 8 year agave where we have, like a jabalí that's around 15 years of age, or Tobalo, which is about 10, Karwinskis that are 12, something like that. So we changed it into a different bottle just to make it a little bit sleeker and that, but it is still part of the Carreño lineup.
Got it. How do you guys get the smokiness and the different flavors that are coming out?
So the different essences come from the different varieties of agave, but the smokiness just comes from the production method. So smoke is just a byproduct of the cooking process. There is a conical oven underneath the ground that kind of looks like that, and you basically fill it up with wood. Then you put a layer of rock, and then you put your pencas. Pencas are the leaves from the agave, so you put them on top of that, and then that's where you put your agave hearts on top of that, and then you make kind of like a pyramid mound. You cover that with the tarp, and then you put about 2 feet of dirt on top of it. And so it sits there, and it basically bakes for about 5 to 7 days on average. So that is just the smoky, that's where it gets it. It's imparted into it. So we don't do any injecting any smoke or anything into the liquid. That's just the same cooking process. For mezcal, and I'm glad that you touched on that subject, for mezcal, it shouldn't never be a smoke bomb. And the reason it should never be a smoke bomb is because if they're smoking it too much, that's either one, that was the flavor profile that specific brand wanted to do with it. But I prefer not to over smoke them because I want to let the agave show through. I want to let those notes from those specific varieties of agave shine through. And that's kind of why my aunt, Lorena Carreño, who's the owner of Mezcal Carreño, she decided the 40% for Naran, 46% for the Carreños, to let those beautiful flavors come out.
Let's back up a little bit on kind of the part of your journey. You're working at one of the largest cable companies in the world, right, or in the country at least, and you got kind of your career set up at this point. How did the transition happen for you?
It's really funny because like I said, man, it was a great job. I had a pension,
Yeah.
I and you can get pensioned out at 25 years of working for a company, right? I was at year 13. So I was like halfway there.
Yeah.
And basically, at the time, my business partner, he basically sat me down and he said, I think we should do this. Let me back it up a little bit as well, too. When my aunt decided to turn this into a business, she kind of kept on telling me to bring it up to the States to help with the distribution up here because I'm the only one on the Carreño family that lives up here. And I originally was working at telecom, so I was like, I don't know how to do that. Like, I can fix your cable or internet if it doesn't work, but I don't know I don't know the first thing about selling mezcal, you know?
Did she have any distribution in the U.S. at that point?
No, she didn't. That's kind of how it was. But, my business partner was like, dude, I went to school and I got a marketing degree and we can figure this out.
Your family's in the business.
Like
we should do this.
We're going to complement each other. And so I was like, man, I was like, if you say so. And I was like, I'm in. It was one of those things where it was like, I'm in. We sat down and we chatted out a little bit of how it was. We swapped my schedule at work. So I was working 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. And then as soon as 3 p.m. came, I just left the door and I'd had mezcal in the car and I'd go around and I'd, go knocking on doors and kind of figured that out kind of as we went along. But it was crazy because like when we were changing like my schedule and stuff, there was like for the first year almost, we didn't really know anything about liquor laws and we didn't know anything about importing it, transportation, how to get it through the actual border, customs, fees.
There's a lot to figure out.
It was so much. Yeah. And basically, Google's my best friend, dude. I didn't give up. And the worst thing about it too is there's no set book. Like if you want to open up an LLC, if you want to start a business, there's like classes now that you can take. There's business development things that you can do as far as creating your business. This is step 1, register it with the Arizona Corporation Commission. Like take these next steps, right? Get an EIN, all these things. There's no book for liquor companies. Like there's none. And I just remember I would just fall into rabbit holes of people that like internet pages of like the people that I would read and like things like that, and then asking around, getting mentors and all of that.
What I'd love to figure out is you're down your career path at this point. You're inspired from your business partner and friend at this point, your family, and was that like a year or two where you're doing research and you're figuring the whole thing out, or did you like go all in on one moment?
So it was just that. So it was that moment. It was the day after my birthday. I remember vividly. We went out. We had gone out to, I think it was Maple and Ash. We had like celebrated my birthday at a steakhouse, and like normally we would go out with my friends because it's hard to get all my group of friends together, and so we'd always go out, kind of hit the town, and then that was kind of it. My friend, business partner, ended up saying, "Hey, I'm not going to go out with you guys tomorrow or tonight because I want you to be at my house tomorrow, 8 a.m." This is Saturday. I'm like, Sunday's a holy day. We just relax. And he's like, nope, just be at my house. And I was like, man, this guy's going to tell me some bad news or something. Like he's not going out with us. Like he's, I'm thinking the worst. Sure. But I show up and that's when he dropped the knowledge of saying, hey, I think we can do this and turn this into a business. And that like right there and then is like when I said, all right, let's do this. And we called up my aunt in Mexico. We put her on speakerphone and we were just like, hey, we're gonna go all in. Like there's no around it.
We're bringing the mezcal to the States.
We're bringing the mezcal to the States.
I mean, talk about a 2% factor moment. That was a game changer moment for you guys right there, right?
Yeah.
So that's when you made the decision, we're going to go in.
Yeah. And then it was funny because like my aunt's a 2% factor moment girl as well. And she's like, what took you so long?
I've been waiting for you.
I've been waiting for you.
I love it. Okay. Yeah. Curious, how long from that point to, let's say, competing in the 2020 competition in San Francisco did that take?
So that was 2018.
Okay.
So 2018 is when we had started the LLC and when we had started the business. But we didn't have our first import until 2019. So because we didn't have our full import, what I was doing is I was still doing the telecom work. And I was working the 6 to 3 and then going out. And I did that for 2 more years. I ended up quitting March 6th of 2020, right before we had submitted to San Francisco World Spirits. And then there was another moment as well that happened because I remember vividly. We have WhatsApp as a family group chat, and I remember the day that I had walked out of the company and I like recording it. I'm kind of like feeling tense and kind of like trembling a little bit because I'm just literally giving up this company, this awesome, steady scenario case of my work, of essentially my career, and I'm just going to go all in on it. And so I remember sending them a video, and I was like, all right, guys, I just need all the positive vibes right now that you guys need to send my way, because I'm literally walking out of my job.
Wow.
And everybody was like, you got this. Like, we're not going to let it fail. Like, everything was amazing that way. And then talk about another moment. That was March 6th. My cousin was getting married March 14th. So I was taking an 8-day vacation to go see him and spend some time with the family while they were getting married and all that. And the wedding was in Guadalajara. Flew through American Airlines. Get to Guadalajara. Wedding's amazing. We have like a wedding a day after party, and that was on the 15th. And then on the 16th of March, that was the day of 2020, 16th of March of 2020, that we found out that we had won the San Francisco World Spirits competition. And then we also get hit with another big factor moment. That was the day that Arizona shut down because of COVID.
Right.
And my flight was canceled.
How did COVID impact, having this liquor brand that you're just got super excited about because you won, the top award? How did COVID impact that?
Well, I just quit the day job.
Yeah.
It impacted that because I didn't have a flight back. I didn't have a job to come back to. And the Naran that we're actually drinking and sipping on, Naran hadn't been launched. Naran was kind of on the back burner. Like, we had it, but we never had brought it out, and we weren't really sure about that. But COVID, basically, when that happened, I was like, you know what? It's kind of a good thing that I don't have a job, because I can actually do whatever it is that I want to do now. And so I ended up taking off with the family, and we just went back to the hacienda, and we just got to work, and we were able to launch Naran. So COVID actually impacted me a lot on the personal side, where like I didn't come back for a few months. But then on the business side, it allowed us to develop the brand Naran, which is what we needed as well.
I think the branding and the whole look of your brand is phenomenal. It's an ultra premium brand, but the bottle and the color scheme, the label, is that something? How did you guys come up with that?
So I take no credit for any of that. That's my Aunt Lorena, Lorena Carreño. She's the owner of that. She had the design made with one of her friends, and it was inspired off of a Zapotec King's Cup. So Oaxaca, the state, it is Zapotec culture. So kind of like Aztecs and Mayans and things like that. So it is Zapotec culture. And we have a temple in Montelvan, and that is where all the kings are buried. And so it was a cup from Montelvan that they found in a king's chamber that had these little round nubs all around it. And so that's where we got our inspiration for our bottle. So because they call mezcal the drink of the gods, when you're drinking Carreño, you're drinking the god's juice out of a king's cup, basically.
What about any advice you have to people who are in, a job that they've, just like your situation, right? What kind of advice do you have to people who have, aspirations of being an entrepreneur and taking that leap? What kind of advice do you have on that?
Dude, do it. Do it is the thing I say. It's those moments of like the change or the tidal wave that you feel and you hit. It's for me as right before I had quit, we were all in on this, and I put a second mortgage on my mom's house as I quit. And so it was one of those moments of like what I like to call the tectonic plates of emotion that are shifting. And you feel like sometimes they're going to open up and it's going to just swallow you, but sometimes they come together and they form the mountain that you're going to have to climb. And it's going to be hard. It definitely is hard. It's a lot of early mornings, a lot of late nights, but there's no one way up that mountain. There's no one way. You just keep chugging along. You keep going forward, one step at a time, and you can get up to the top, no matter which way you do it, but you can get up to the top. If there's anybody out there that just doesn't want to do it, dude, I say just do it and go for it. It's scary. It's scary, but it's worth it.
I mean, taking out a second mortgage on your mom's house in order to put some money behind this thing, that's a scary thing to do.
Well, it was funny because I told my mom, I was like, yeah, I'm going to quit my job. And she's like, all right, if that's what you want. And I was like, all right, but I also need some money. And she goes, I don't have any money. And I was like, I know. However, I was all like, would you be okay if I put a second mortgage on your house? And she just stepped back for a second. And this is the same lady that, we would go wash clothes in the Food City cart. And I remember going with her and translating with her at DMV to get her a license. I remember all of the paperwork that we had to fill out for the naturalization process and stuff to that nature. So this is the lady that has grown up together with me, and she's just like my rock, and she's like idol of like how she taught me on all of like the work ethic, like just get up and do your job, like, go for it, all these things. So she's always supported me. And I was just really, really hoping that she would keep on saying yes. And she just looks back and she says, I'm going to support you because I believe in you. And when somebody tells you that, this is amazing. And then she just goes, just please promise me that you're not going to lose my house. And so that's some of the motivation right there. That's a 2% factor because that's what drives me, like
Absolutely.
I'm like, I can't lose this house for this lady.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the emotion behind it, right? Because no matter what, you've got to come through.
Yeah.
When you look at the growth of the business, where you're in on this thing since 18, 19, when you got into it, how do you see the brand today? You're in a lot of restaurants, Phoenix, as you know, Scottsdale, there's a big restaurant, in terms of scene here. A lot of people, the whole area is growing like crazy. Carreño is in a lot of the places that I go to. And yet for you, I'm curious, do you see Carreño, at 10% of where it could be right now, 50%? Where do you see it in terms of growth potential?
As far as numbers, the way we kind of count them is we count like every placement. So we have about 550 places that carry us across the state. So it's very minimal the places that don't carry us. Yeah. So I would say in the state of Arizona, we're probably at like 50 to 60%. Okay. But when you're talking about the global scale of the whole U.S., I want to say we're at maybe 5% of what we could be doing. Yeah. If we got into some of those key important states that have a food scene or a cocktail scene that are doing amazing, like New York, Miami, Chicago, Washington, like anything like that, we would probably blow up a little bit bigger.
What's the big challenge there? Is it distribution?
Yeah, so it's distribution because here, I'm doing this by myself. I'm running around. I've got the car, loaded with mezcal in the morning when all the orders come in. So go to the warehouse, load it up, go distribute, come back, deposit checks, make sure, all of the things are there. And so it's just like, I wish I had a lot more of me to go around. I wish I was out of my, I'll tell you the family story as well, but like I wish I had just 10 more of me so I could drop one in each state.
Let's talk a little bit about the mezcal.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got some new ones here.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about them. So I've told you guys the espadín portion off of this, but let me just kind of explain the difference between tequila and mezcal, if you're okay with that. Yeah. As you see these bottles that are up here, there's basically with, like, for example, wine. If you were to think of wine is kind of like a father umbrella, and you've got all the different varieties of the grapes. Then you have one grape that's very special, where it's not a straight down, it's more of like in a diagonal shape, and that is the Pinot Noir grape. If it's the Pinot Noir grape from the Champagne part of France, then you can't call it wine, you have to call it champagne. That same grape in the region of California is sparkling wine, cava in Spain, and then Prosecco in Italy, but it still gets made from grape. In essence, all cava, all champagne, all Prosecco is the son of wine, which is wine is the big kind of father umbrella, and wine will never be champagne. So it's the exact same thing with agaves. With agaves, they're succulents, part of the Agaveaceae family, and actually closely related to yuccas and Joshua trees. With them, there's over 300 different species of agave varietals. And the father umbrella for anything that's made out of agaves is mezcal. Mezcal is the father. And we happen to have one that is not in a straight line. It's more of like in a diagonal shape, and it is the Blue Weber Tequilana agave. So if it's the Blue Weber Tequilana agave from the tequila region, then that is tequila. So basically all tequila is kind of the son of mezcal, and mezcal will not be tequila is kind of how it is.
Well, I find that interesting too. I don't think most people know tequila is a version of mezcal, right? It falls underneath the mezcal umbrella.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah. And so that's what it is. And so kind of now getting back to these are different varieties of agave varietals that we have. I didn't bring all 10 of them. I just brought you some of the brand newest ones that actually just hit this year. The next one over, what's got that green label, that one is called Madre Quiche. It is a Karwinski. It grows up kind of taller like a yucca plant or a Joshua tree. And let me grab you some of that.
This is it right here?
Yeah, that's the one. So just go ahead. Dude, go ahead. Good. Go ahead, pour it out. And then basically...
You're going to make me finish the Neuron first.
Yeah, you're gonna, you're not done with that? So that is... So Madre Quiche, it's got some funky notes to it. So it'll be like green. It's almost got like a yuzu, mushroomy, dirt feeling, earthiness to it. And then it finishes off almost like what a... agricole rum kind of funk would have, but it doesn't have a punch you in your face kind of funk. It's kind of like what I like to call a clarified funk.
I love tasting the different mezcals. I agree with you. I feel like it is a lot like the wine conversation. You can, and scotch too, right? And whiskeys and bourbons. You can taste the essence of each one. But what I do love about what you said earlier in terms of when you talk about smokiness and you talk about how you actually take care and how you make the product. To me, this is your mezcal has the most kind of purest taste to it because I can really taste the different flavors that it doesn't feel artificial or overdone.
Yep. Like we said, we pride ourselves on that, and then we're also small batch. That's bottle 114 out of 400. We're not mass producing this by any means to just to get rich. This isn't like a get rich quick scheme for us. I mean, Carreño is our last name. We basically want to leave a great legacy, and so we believe in just providing the best kind of out there. Our tagline is the exceptional as possible.
Well, it definitely hits that. Tell me about. I think the story about the mezcal that won the competition and the name of it is really cool.
I'll definitely tell you that story. That is for the Ensemble 7, but the Ensemble 7 came about with my great-grandfather's opinion. My great-grandfather had the 1,500 acres, so he had 12 children because he needed a lot of laboring hands to work the fields, right? And traditionally in Hispanic culture, whether it's the youngest boy or girl, will kind of see the family, live with the family, see them pass on because they always stay with the family in the family house. They end up get to keep in the house. So that was my grandfather. My grandfather was the youngest. His name is Pedro. And Pedro had this awesome life, kept the house with the family. Pedro gets married, and Pedro sees my grandmother, storybook wedding. He puts her on the back of a horse. They ride off into the sunset, and he promises her 3 things. He says, I will never look at another girl ever again. You're going to be my queen, and everything that I have will be yours. And he said, I need 3 things back, though. I need 3 boys, no matter what. And it goes girl, boy, boy. And they said, cool, 1 more boy, and then we could stop. But we're not stopping until we get that last boy. And then it goes girl, 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 girl. Wow. And then finally on the 10th, they had a boy. And so my great-grandfather was still alive at the time. And so he basically said, you stubborn man, to my grandfather. He said, you wanted 3 boys. He said, if you wouldn't have wanted that last boy, I would have never had the 7 granddaughters that I have that were meant to be for me. And so I want to honor that. I want to make a blended agave of mezcal of 7 different wild agaves so that each agave represents the daughters. They're going to be all cooked together. They're going to be mashed together. They're going to be fermented together, and they're going to be distilled together, all in equal weights, so that not one girl gets represented more or less. And the flavor on that, it's so neat and elegant, very delicate, very silky, very complex with lots of layers and lots of depth, but very well balanced. With light lingering notes of pineapple and light smoke towards the back end of the palate. And so that's where we have that one, which is kind of how we ended up creating our logo as well. But that's the one that had won in San Francisco because there's not another brand out there that has a blend of 7. It's uniquely only to us.
Like, is that the most popular one, or did it start? It obviously kicked off with that, right?
It kicked
That's what really got the business with some reputation behind it and notoriety.
Correct. Yeah, it basically kicked off with that. Naran is kind of like your starting point. Naran is an espadín, like I was saying. I like to tell people your espadín on your lineup is going to dictate your lineup. If you can't create a solid espadín, then you're not going to really do well on other things. I use that as an analogy for when I go to restaurants. If they have calamari on the menu as a starter, I will grab calamari. Because it's something that's super simple, but if you mess that up, I'm like, oh man, you're probably gonna mess up everything else.
How can you trust everything else?
Exactly.
Got it.
So just the fact that like Naran is just so clean and crisp, everything else is amazing. But sometimes I think I'm biased because I drink so much of it. So like if you ever see me out and about and I'm drinking somebody else's stuff, it's because it's just like I'm making sure that we're still kind of where we are as being as a premium spirit.
What has been for you when you look back on what's occurred over the last 3 or 4 years for you? What's been a standout decision that you've made as an entrepreneur that's changed the outcome of your business and your mezcal line?
One of the decisions is just not giving up. Not giving up is like the biggest thing, because God, there was times when we were like started this that I was just like, it was like there was one restaurant I kept on going, and I went every day for 1 week because the restaurant owner told me, he goes, come back tomorrow, I've got no time. And then I'd come back tomorrow and I, wait for about an hour, kind of just sitting there because he was like running around getting a bunch of stuff. And then he'd be like, come back, I don't have any time. And then I'd do the same thing. It was like a week. And then finally, like at the end of the week, he goes, you know what? I still don't have any time. But he goes, talk to my manager. And so I talked to the manager and I show him the story. I have him sample the product. And he goes, this is exactly what we needed. He goes, I'm sorry that I hasn't had time, but we're going to get you in here. And so after that, we became really good friends. And he goes, I'm sorry that I just kept on, doing that. But I feel like if I would have given up, I would have, we would have never had that friendship that I have now with him. And he's doing amazing stuff at Anelo, getting ready to open up a second location, and he's got fine dining. And so it's amazing. So things like that are the things that make it all worth it.
I mean, perseverance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just pushing and keeping going and having the faith. Well, now you've got a reputation behind you.
Yeah.
Right? And so now is it about moving to other states and increasing distribution outside of Phoenix and Arizona?
That's going to be the next move. So the next move is Florida and Texas is what I want to do. That's going to be the new thing. It's just now finding the right partner out there that's going to be able to kind of help with us and kind of showcase and explain the family history and that for us.
When I talk to people about mezcal, you have the best, in the highest reputation category, right? How do you deal with the fact that people might want to buy you at this point, right? That people have come along that say, hey, we want to scoop you up. Is that something that you guys are challenged with right now? And
we've had those talks before, and it's, I don't want to sell it now because I'm like, it's one of those things where it's like now I know what it took. I know the recipe and I'm super proud of it. So I'm like, no, like I want to do this again. Like I kind of feel like I said, we're in 500 places or so across the state of Arizona. Like the mountain in AZ was climbed, and I feel like I want to go climb another mountain, if we ever get absorbed, that'll be a call that I can't physically make because it's my aunt that owns it. So I just want to, still be a part of it and go that route.
What about, Ivan, something that I've noticed, right, in the kind of beverage, liquor industry in particular, not even just liquor, it's also in seltzer, you'll see a lot of celebrities getting behind brands, right, of tequila, of seltzers, of, different, even in energy drinks, right? You'll see a lot of celebrity sponsorship, ownership, equity, promotion. Is that required in order to grow the brand?
It's not required, but what I do think is it helps because they bring all of that kind of marketing. Mm-hmm. I don't personally like it as far as, it's such a double-edged sword for that. Like, I don't personally like it because I would rather support that actor on a movie instead. I'd rather go watch his movie or purchase the movie, Blu-ray for my house or just get it downloaded or anything like that. That's what I would rather do, help him support, because I want to support that actor and what I like.
You still watch Blu-rays? Did you just say Blu-ray?
I do. I have a big old collection of Blu-rays. This is when he came out and you bought them, like Gladiator, man. I just pop that on sometimes.
Okay.
And so I'd rather help them support it that way. But it's not that they probably haven't fallen in love with the spirit, but it's their specialty and their forte is actor or comedian or whatever it is that they do. And so I would say just stick to what you do best.
That's their lane, right?
Yeah, it's their lane. On the opposite side of that, they are bringing a ton of awareness to the industry. There's so many people that were like, "Oh, it's like George Clooney's. Oh, it's like Casamigos or like The Rock." They're like, "Oh, it's Terramana." Right. So they're starting to figure these out and things like that. And so I basically go, all right, if they're bringing a lot of awareness into the industry and into the category, like I'm like, all right, cool, you've had that. Try this, try our product. And I'm not going to tell you which one's best. I would want you to tell me which one you prefer the most. And it's one of those things where some people like real street tacos. Some people love Taco Bell, and they make the choice. You just put up a taco stand, have them try it, and they'll make the decisions.
All right, should we try the next one?
The next one is called Lumbre. Lumbre is kind of a rare wild varietal as well. And basically, they named it lumbre because lumbre is like hot heat fire, is what it is in Spanish. And basically, it's like you're sitting on a beach out in Florida on a warm summer day because it's gonna fill you up with a lot of heat, like from the sun. It's gonna have a lot of citrus notes, smells, tastes, almost like a little cutie. And then it's gonna finish off with a really like a minerally feel, like almost if you got some sand stuck in your mouth.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah, it's really, really good.
The tough part is all of them are really, really good.
You're correct on that. You are correct on that. But it's a cool thing because, for example, mezcal is the cleanest form of spirit. It's zero headache, zero hangover.
Yeah.
So it's
Let's
hard
talk
to-
about that. I feel like that notion is caught on a little bit.
Yeah. So as long as it's 100% agave and it's not anything that has any additives, remember big numbers are ones that have a lot of additives. So if you get a headache from that, that's not a good tequila or mezcal. But it's on the process, you don't use any sort of things to help speed it up. And so it's basically like, I remember when I was little, my mom used to always have a little garden, and in her garden, she would always keep mint. And mint is like a homeopathic remedy for like stomach aches. And so she would basically grab the mint, boil it in water, strain the water, and put a little bit of honey in it. And
Yeah,
then
I've seen the same thing with bay leaf.
yeah. So 10 minutes later, no more stomach ache, right? And so basically what you do with the agave plant is you harvest it, you cook it, you mash it to get it kind of in a liquid form, and then you ferment it, and then you distill it without any additives. So it's the cleanest form of sugar. And traditionally in Oaxaca, they give it to type 2 diabetics to help stabilize their glucose levels throughout the day. It gets given to pregnant women for 40 days after they give birth. It's like if you've got a baby and he's got a fever or he's got a cold, you run him a really warm bath and you put 2 ounces of mezcal in the water. And so there's a lot of like connections that we have as far as things that we do for all these holistic purposes.
It's amazing. I think that the concept of clean liquor has really caught on in terms of I think it's probably we're much more educated nowadays in terms of healthy living, right? Healthy foods, healthy drinking, that kind of thing.
Yep.
I think that has definitely played a role in the popularity of tequila, along with celebrity endorsement and more awareness. But I feel like tequila and mezcal has gotten so much bigger, from a popularity standpoint than it was 5 years ago.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, it is. It's also because it's so clean, like all those things that I was telling you, it was dubbed the cleanest form of spirit by the Chicago Institute of Health. And that's where we're going as a society. What am I putting into my body and all of this? And so that's why it's already surpassed sales for whiskey this year already. So it's amazing.
Has it really?
Yeah.
What about from a business strategy standpoint? I'm curious how you think about this. It feels to me like it's a choice to go for more batch, or not batch, but more of small batch, ultra premium, smaller quantity, higher price point. Choosing that as a business strategy as compared to more, medium range price point, higher level of quantity. How did you guys go through those conversations?
So those conversations sometimes aren't anything that we can dictate. Each one of these is one of 400 bottles. There isn't a lot of agave out there that's rare, wild varietal out there that you're going to go and make, 50,000 bottles of it. You can't. There's not enough. So it's just kind of dictated by what there is. Going back to, the farming, there's people out there that just farm basically agave. Some of it, like the Madre Cuiche, is used for in between farmlands. They use that as fencing, natural fencing, because they grow up taller. And so they have that as just kind of to show where property lines are at. And so while the farmers are growing something else like bean or corn, because they take so long, they'll just throw up a row of it because they know that they could sell it later. But if we don't have any that are ready and we have to, maybe grab a few from like some of our neighbors or something like that, we'll buy it from them and things, and just to make sure we have enough to make a batch. But some batches are even smaller than that. I have friends that make batches that are maybe like one of 60 liters,
Yeah.
Things that I would wish that there was more so more people could try it. But I think that that's where you're going to start to see kind of more brands getting pushed out that have this kind of nicer quality, lower number production.
I mean, I love it. And I have a lot of friends that are into Scotch and, single malt and small batch, bourbons and whiskeys. And, it's such a great experience. I also read recently that an agave shortage is being predicted as well.
Some of those bigger brands, some of those endorsements from those celebrities and stuff are causing kind of turmoil because they're big brands, so they just kind of come in and harvest a ton of different agave, and so that's always kind of those issues as well, where you kind of feel bad because you're like, man, there isn't enough. But what'll happen is it'll stabilize itself. This market's kind of been it always goes through ups and downs, right? So like if there's a celebrity that came up and they're at a height and they're selling a ton of it, then there will be a shortage for a little bit. But then people will kind of get the idea and they'll plant more, and then there will be a surplus of it in a few years. Is what'll happen.
Okay, should we try the last one?
Go ahead. I'll talk a little bit about it while you pour that one up.
Perfect.
That one is called Jabalí. Scientific name is Cornvalis. Javali, think of it just like if it was a jabalina, right? Like a pig. It's kind of the way it is. It's very hard to work with. If you don't really know how to produce it, it'll basically overflow on the fermentation process. And then on the distillation process, what it does is it leaves kind of like a film on your stills each and every single time that you distill, and you have to distill twice. So you really have to go in there and clean it by hand manually after each distillation. So it kind of very dirty. So that's why they had named it, Javali. That one, it's got a really nice viscosity mouthfeel. It's kind of very like silky on the mouthfeel, velvety. Okay, it's gonna have some great cooked agave flavors, and then it finishes off with like a sweetness. It has a sweetness almost like big league chew gum. That's what it reminds me of.
What's your favorite Carreño Mezcal?
Oh man, we have Tobasiche. Tobasiche is my favorite. That's I don't know. That's one that I can always go back through. Sometimes if you like see me out and about, you'll see like one bottle kind of like halfway gone because we'll sit there and we'll be pouring out one, and then you're like, there's more of these that we can pour out and drink with friends, And so then we'll kind of do that. And so we'll drink maybe a lot of like Madre Cuish sometimes, and we're like, all right, done with Madre Cuish for this week. Let's jump on to something else. But the one that I always go back to is Tobasiche.
So, Ivan, as we wrap up, have you had mentors that have helped you through your process of becoming an entrepreneur?
Yeah. I've had a lot of mentors and a lot of actual just people help us. That's why like if I have anybody, I'd love to help them. They'll ask me questions and I love to help them because we've had so much help. Jason from Crujiente Tacos, he built a distribution company. He's helped us out.
I know exactly. Yeah, right off like 44th and Camelback area.
Yep. He was a huge advocate of us. Like I remember going in there to pitch him because I knew he had a distribution company that he built and sold. So I knew he had a great palate. And so like I go to kind of pitch him and I'm kind of like, shaking a little bit. And he goes, dude, relax. Like he goes, this is like, it's good stuff. Like this is what mezcal should be like. I was like, and I'm just like relaxing, Justin Cross from Earn Your Booze. Now it's Earn It All. He's an amazing guy. He loves to give me support and like teach me the ways, teach me some ropes, teach me some things on how to do it, taking care of our body as well, earning it. So things like that. Mentors as well, like my aunt. So one of my aunts, she's kind of like our biggest supporter as well, because she's always like anything that I post on social media. They're a little bit older, but she hits that share button on Facebook every time. She's like, best mezcal. So have a lot of mentors and a support group that it helps. And it just keeps you motivated.
Are there any big competitions that are coming up that you're targeting to try to continue the awards?
No, but we're going to do a couple competitions here.
Okay.
So we're going to do a couple of bartender competitions. We got some new stuff as well. We've partnered up with a couple of other people to be bringing in some different spirits. So we kind of been known for great mezcal. This is kind of already kind of wanted and demanded now. But now we're going to be bringing in some stuff like some gin. From Europe. Yep.
Okay.
We got some gin from Europe. We're going to bring in some bubbles, and then more mezcal because next year, I believe they're trying to make my aunt the president for the women of mezcal. So we're going to launch a whole new intermediate brand that'll be in between the Naran and the Carreño lineup, which is going to be called Bocanada. So we're gonna try and do something where we help more and give back more to the community that way, and helping maybe possibly bringing up other people's juice in that one bottle, like one of 100 or one of 60, like I was saying, where we have like limited editions, but they're separate from the Carreño lineup, but we still help out.
For listeners that are in places that they don't live in Arizona, how can they help influence getting Carreño to their market? Or can they?
It's hard. No, they
Yeah.
can't, and it's hard because you can't get it except for through a company called Old Town Tequila.
Okay.
So you can go to oldtowntequila.com, and that's the only place that can actually ship to you. Because of all the legalities, you can't, like, I can't ship it to them. So that's the hard part about it. But I get messages like that all the time. I get messages from like people that are like, "When is it hitting Texas? You know, I want it in Texas," and that's why I'm like, "We're working on it, guys. We're working on it. Give me a little bit."
All right, Ivan. So there's one question we ask to all of our guests, and I'm really interested to ask you this question: is what advice would you give? What would you say to yourself if you were speaking to your 22-year-old self? Speaking to 22-year-old Ivan Carreño, what would you say to yourself?
Honestly, this question I've thought of a lot because when I was 22, my uncle was like, "Why don't you help me start a carpet company?" He was in the business of doing carpet and tile work and stuff like that, and I was all like, "No, I don't know how to do this." Like, I just didn't believe in myself. And the thing is like, believe in yourself and go out there and do it. Find the help. There's people that are willing to help and will teach you the things. Because I started it at like 32 is when I started this. If I would have had an extra 10 years, like, man, I just can imagine all the things that I could definitely do. So that's my biggest thing is a lot of people are like, "Oh man, use your 20s as like the time to, travel the world, see all the things, don't get committed or locked down." And that's when I'm like, that should be the time that you hustle the most. That's when you have the most time. That's when you have the most energy. That's when you should be just like hungry for it all so that you can relax in your 30s and 40s and be able to enjoy something that you've built. So that's my biggest thing. It's kind of like, why didn't I start it sooner? But I think it's one of those things on how they say, because like for mezcal, they say that you don't find mezcal, mezcal finds you. We had it in our family for a long time, and I just didn't think of it like that. And then when it changed in my mind to turn it into a business, it found me.
Well, the funny thing about that too is, you in a lot of ways you are where you should be. Meaning, when you look back on your experience previous to jumping in 1819, a lot of that, a lot of that is what drives you, right? Going forward now with your entrepreneurial, mindset, right? I mean, you did a job for 13 years. You know what that path is, and now, you have a different path. And I think in a lot of ways that fuels you. Even though you could have done it younger, you wouldn't have known what you know now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. That 13 years, I wouldn't have had that. And then I don't know if mentally I was strong enough at 22
Right.
where like, all of like the paperwork that I had that's where I was like, I'm glad that I did it at the time that it happened. I'm a firm believer of that as well. Just like you are where you're meant to be at right now.
Right. So where can people find Carreño Mezcal? Where can they find you?
Some Total Wines, Trevor's up here.
Love Trevor's.
Yep. And the new one, Flagstaff, Sedona, a ton of places. Just check it out when you go to a new restaurant or anything. Most of it, like I said, we're in most places as well.
Beautiful. Salud.
Salud, hermano.
Thank you to Ivan Carreño from Carreño Mezcal for joining us on the 2% Factor podcast. Please like and subscribe to hear more stories about how micro decisions can impact your life and your journey and your overall story. So thank you again to Ivan, and thank you for joining.